All right, everybody, welcome back. So the JH-7 was one of those surprise late additions to the dev server, and it's one of the more interesting aircraft out of this patch. It's the only new airframe as far as I'm aware. It's actually been since March since we got a new airframe at top tier, and even though this isn't technically a new fighter per se, it still does bring a breath of fresh air. It's also the first actually domestic Chinese design as far as I'm aware. Although it does seem to take a little bit of inspiration from other designs at the time, it's still a unique aircraft, and I'm glad to see it in the game. Now, as for what you can expect out of it flight performance-wise, I've been pleasantly surprised. Now, it's not fast. That's the biggest thing I can say about it, is that it has a hard time really passing 1300. You are going to be redlining at about that speed. I haven't actually ripped it yet, but I don't doubt that it most likely rips in level of flight, because it does have very good acceleration because of the Rolls-Royce SPA engines that it has. Now, it may have the, domestically licensed produced versions of these, but they are still SPA engines regardless. And if you've used the FGRs before, they have some pretty gnarly thrusts, especially at lower speeds. It gives this thing very, very good acceleration. And that really carries it because it flies very much like the Jaguar, if you've experienced that yourself. The only difference is that in this case, it actually has plenty of thrust to back it up. And so, it can pull its nose around, it'll pull a lot of AOA, it'll bleed speed while it's doing it, but it has plenty of thrust that actually allows it to go ahead and abuse that. The sustained turn is also not bad at all, just once again purely because of that thrust, and I had a pretty fun time dogfighting in it. Now, this thing isn't going to be an amazing dogfighter like some of the other stuff of this BR, but you can see I'm sustaining 13 Gs right here pretty steadily and not losing a ton of speed while I'm doing it. This thing is no slouch. I'd say it'll easily whip something like a Phantom in a dogfight. Even if you're rate fighting with it, you're not going to have any issues. Now, I haven't actually extensively tested this out against other planes, but the big thing is going to be exploiting your AOA. Just like you can see I did right there with the F4S, I was able to pull lead on him, and you are going to need to pull a lot of lead with this gun. Just partially because of how much AOA is just able to pull at the end of the day. And this is also going to let you pull inside people in a dogfight, and then you can abuse your superior acceleration to go ahead and catch up to them. Now, it's not going to accelerate with something like a MiG-29, for example, but it is still relatively close regardless, and it is definitely a major advantage that the aircraft has. Especially in down tiers like you see right here, I can't think of a single plane in a 10.3 lobby that's going to be accelerate with you, except for maybe something like the FGR, and you will handily beat that in a dogfight. So you can out-accelerate pretty much everything you fight in a down tier. It can also kind of keep up with them in a dogfight, even with this F5C right here. Now, I am super low on fuel, but you can see I'm able to cut inside his turn multiple times just to make sure that he can't actually get guns on, and this is an F5C player, so it's probably not a great representation, but I do actually manage to get the kill here. Now, I wouldn't take this to mean that it beats the F5C in a dogfight by any means, but this just shows that despite being an attacker, this thing is very competent in a dogfight, which I was very, very much pleasantly surprised by. So I did just say that it is an attacker, and unfortunately that means that, the Chinese weren't that pressed to go ahead and give it a lot of missiles, right? You get 4 missiles max. Now, these are still pretty good missiles to the BR, but they are still only 4 missiles. Now, your main weapons are going to be those PLH, those are the Python 3. These missiles are absolutely just incredible. You can see right there, one of my favorite things to do with them is to just fire them in a head-on at a kilometer, because they are so fast that most of the time people just aren't able to flare them in time. These missiles have the same flare resistance as the AIM-9L. They have the exact same range band values, and they have the same 3.6 field of view. And while that does mean they are still a pretty easy one flare at range, with the rise time changes, and especially exploiting the Python's acceleration, these missiles are actually really lethal at close range rear aspect. They'll ignore flares quite often now, just because they get too close before the flares are able to heat up. For those of y'all who don't know, rise time is how long it takes the missiles to go ahead and heat up, and Gaijin recently increased that. I believe that was in the last patch or so. But these Pythons have decent flare resistance, great range, great pull. They're 40G missiles. They're one of the best IR missiles in the game. I would say they're probably the 3rd best of the short-range IR missiles. The R-73 and the AIM-9A are both better than it, but it's still a very competent missile. Now, once those are out, you're left with the PL-5C. And I've seen a lot of people talking about this missile. It's really nothing amazing. It's literally just a PL-5B with a different seeker head. And in this case, it has a worse AIM-9L seeker head. So I'm going to go ahead and pop it up on screen now. It has the same 1-to-1 range band ratio as something like the AIM-9L, for example, but unfortunately it does have a bigger field of view, which means that it sees more flares and is easier to flare, especially at longer ranges. In general, the smaller the field of view, the more difficult a missile is to flare, although a bigger field of view can let it reacquire sometimes after the flares burn out. But just keep that in mind. PL5B with an all aspects seeker head, a little bit worse than the AIM-9L for flare assistance. Now, that's not what this plane was actually made for. That's not what it's actually good at doing. This thing is actually really good for CAS. It's a lot better than the Q5L. It's a lot better than the F-16MLU. Now, you get laser-guided bombs, which are much more reliable than the AGM-65Bs, and these are really good ones, too. They're nice, big, 1,000 kilograms. You get 4 of them, and you get a pretty good, thermal pod as well along with it. I haven't experienced any of the issues with it, dropping lock, or missing the target like I have with, the smaller laser-guided bombs, like a Paveway, for example. And then you also are able to carry a full load of 4 missiles as well while you do that, which is really nice, honestly, because 2 Pythons and 2 PL8s plus a load of 4 1,000 kilogram bombs, this is perfect multi-role for ground RB. It's no F-16C, for example, but it is still a very competent and very decent platform. It does also get the nice RWR that also gives you launch warnings whenever a top-tier SAM is launching at you, so you're going to get all the bells and whistles that you'll need to actually be effective in CAS. Like you can see right here, I'm getting launch warnings from the Tunguska right now, as a matter of fact. Although it doesn't have MAWs like the F-111. It may in the future. It's a very modern aircraft. Honestly, it shouldn't have been as much of an upgrade over the Q5L as it is, because the Q5L is missing PL5Bs, and especially countermeasures. Like, how does it make sense to go from the Q5A with countermeasures to the Q5L, which is the same airframe, and not give it countermeasures, despite giving countermeasures to other aircraft like the AK-141, like the F-5C, that never actually mounted countermeasures because they were theoretically compatible? I just really don't get it, but it is what it is. Overall, though, I would say this has been a surprisingly fun experience. This is a really nice addition for the Chinese top tier, although I would have much rather had a J10. My only gripe with it is that the gun has really weird positioning on like the bottom right side, but I mean, it's not terrible at least. I mean, it's better than some other stuff that I've seen before. I would honestly rather run this over the J8F, despite the J8F getting 6 Pythons and HMD. Just the lower BR, and then just for me at least, the way this thing flies just feels so much better than the J8F, although I can't really describe it. In any case, though, I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and I will catch y'all next time. So, peace, y'all.